The raw, November wind was a scalpel against Marcus Thorne's weathered face, each gust a fresh incision into the old wounds of his soul. He was a ghost in his own life, a man deliberately erased from the world, a former sergeant who now commanded only the silence of the deep woods. But today, the forest's cold indifference was about to be shattered by a discovery so improbable, so out of place in his harsh, solitary existence, that it would feel like a hallucination born of grief and isolation. What he found lying breathless in the frozen leaves wasn't just a life hanging by a thread. It was a secret that could buy him a new world or condemn him to relive his old one, and the choice would tear him apart. For 3 years, the unforgiving wilderness of Hemlock Ridge had been Marcus's penance and his refuge. His cabin, a testament to stubborn survival, clung to the mountainside like a limpet, its 2 small rooms holding the sum of his current existence: a cot, a wood stove, dented cans, and the ghosts of men he couldn't save. Shrapnel still sang a dull song in his left leg, a constant echo of the blast that had ripped his former life to shreds. The deeper shrapnel, the kind that lodged in the heart, was invisible but far more crippling. He spoke more to the silent, judging pines than to any human, his only contact a gruff, non-judgmental jet at the general store miles away in Miller's Creek, where he'd trade furs for necessities. Yet, even in this self-imposed exile, flickers of the man he'd been remained. An injured sparrow would find his wings splintered with a gentle hand. A starving fox would find scraps left near the woodline. These were his quiet acts of rebellion against the darkness, small affirmations of life in a world he'd mostly renounced. He was a man defined by what he'd lost, seeking an absolution he couldn't name. Then he saw it, a smear of unnatural color against the muted browns and grays of the forest floor, near the base of a colossal, ancient redwood. He moved with the ingrained caution of a soldier, his hand instinctively dropping to the worn handle of the hunting knife at his belt. It wasn't an animal. It was a woman, face down, her dark hair splayed like spilled ink, her form disturbingly still. A tremor, not entirely from the cold, ran through him. His carefully constructed solitude, his fragile peace, was about to detonate. He knelt, his bad leg protesting. Her breathing was a shallow, fluttering thing, almost imperceptible. Her clothes, a dark, tailored jacket and matching pants, now ripped and caked with mud, whisper of a world utterly alien to his. One expensive-looking boot was gone, her socked foot a pale, vulnerable white against the damp earth. Scratches marred her cheek, a dark bruise blooming on her temple like a poisonous flower. No bag, no phone, no sign of who she was or how she'd come to be here, miles from any known trail. Every rational instinct, honed by years of self-preservation, screamed at him to retreat, call the sheriff from Jed's. Let the outside world, the world he'd fled, deal with its own. Bringing her into his life was a breach in his defenses he hadn't permitted in years. It meant questions, complications, the potential unearthing of his own buried past. But then he saw the faint pulse fluttering at her throat, a desperate Morse code of life. And the soldier, the protector he thought long dead, stirred. He couldn't leave her. He just couldn't. With a sigh that seemed to carry the weight of all his regrets, he scooped her into his arms. She was terrifyingly light. "All right, Thorne," he muttered, the name a rusty key in a long locked door. One more. The trek back to the cabin was a torment of physical pain and mental turmoil. Each step with her fragile weight against his chest was a fresh crack in the ice around his heart. Inside, the small space was a haven of warmth from the biting wind. He laid her on his cot, the only truly soft thing he owned, and covered her with his thickest wool blanket. He built up the fire in the stove until it roared, a defiant beast against the encroaching cold. His old army first aid kit, a relic of another life, was pressed back into service, cleaning her wounds. His calloused fingers, surprisingly gentle against her soft skin, felt like an act of profound, almost forgotten tenderness. She moaned softly as he disinfected a cut on her temple, but didn't wake. He bandaged her, then carefully examined her swollen ankle. A bad sprain, he guessed. He brewed pine needle tea, a bitter but effective remedy, and managed to get a few sips past her lips. Then he sat on his rough-hewn stool, watching her, the firelight flickering across her bruised face. Even in this state, there was an undeniable, delicate refinement to her features. Who was she? What storm had tea? Round her onto his desolate shore? Hours crawled by. Outside, the wind howled its mournful song. Inside, only the crackle of the fire in her shallow breast disturbed the silence. It was deep into the night when her eyelids fluttered. Blue eyes, startlingly clear, now clouded with confusion and dawning fear, stared up at him. She tried to sit, a sharp cry of pain escaping her as her ankle protested. "Easy," Marcus said, his voice gravelly from disuse, but he consciously softened it. "You're safe." Took a nasty fall. Her gaze darted around the unfamiliar, primitive cabin, then locked onto him, wide and terrified, like a trapped deer. She pulled the blanket tighter. Where am I? Who are you?" Her voice was a fragile whisper. "Name's Marcus. This is my cabin. Found you in the woods, unconscious." He kept his tone, even his posture, unthreatening. "You hit your head. Don't try to push it." He offered her the tin cup of now lukewarm tea. "Drink. It'll help." She hesitated, her eyes searching his, doubt and fear warring with exhaustion. He simply held the cup steady. After a long moment, a trembling hand reached out. Her fingers brushed his as she took the cup, a fleeting contact, but he saw a minuscule easing of the terror in her eyes. Not trust, not yet, but perhaps the first seed of it. He retreated to his stool, granted her the space she clearly needed. He understood fear. He'd built his life around it. The next move had to be hers. In the days that followed, a silent, fragile understanding began to bloom in the small cabin. She told him her name was Eliza, offered one morning with a hesitant glance as he gave her a bowl of rabbit stew. She volunteered nothing more about her past, and Marcus, a connoisseur of locked doors, didn't pry. He tended her wounds, kept the fire alive, brought her water. He slept, uncomfortably, in his chair, his leg a constant, throbbing protest. A small price, he figured. Eliza watched him, her blue eyes missing nothing. His methodical efficiency, the surprising gentleness with which he handled an injured bird he found near the woodpile, the deep, consuming sadness that sometimes settled over him as he stared into the flames. She saw the faded photo by his cracked mirror, a younger, smiling Marcus in uniform, his arm around a laughing comrade. That smile was a ghost of the man before her. Slowly, she began to contribute, folding the blanket precisely, keeping her small corner tidy. One afternoon, while he was chopping wood, she found a loose button on his spare shirt and, with a needle and thread from his sparse kit, meticulously sewed it back on. When he returned, he noticed it almost immediately. He paused, his gaze shifting from the button to her, a flicker of something unreadable, surprise, gratitude, in his eyes. He just nodded, a curt dip of his head, but the air in the cabin felt a fraction warmer. Their days were a rhythm of survival. Marcus would hunt, his skills ensuring they never went hungry. He showed her how to prepare simple foods, how to bank the fire. He never invaded her space, yet his constant, quiet presence became a shield against the terrors that clearly haunted her. He even found her missing boot mired in mud and patiently cleaned it, restoring the expensive leather. When he handed it to her, her eyes glistened. "Thank you," she whispered, the words carrying a new weight of sincerity that resonated within him. One evening, snow falling heavily outside, sealing them in their little world, Eliza broke the comfortable silence. This place that's so quiet. Marcus poked the fire. "That's the point. Don't you ever feel alone?" she ventured, her voice barely audible above the wind. He stared into the flames for a long time. "Lonely is better than some kind of company," he finally said, his voice flat, offering no further explanation. She didn't ask for one. She sensed the abyss of pain behind those words. A few days later, his face was grimmer than usual when he returned from checking his perimeter. "Tracks," he said, his voice tight. "Big boots. Not mine. Clothes." He didn't look at her, but the unspoken question hung heavy. Were they looking for her? That night, his old hunting rifle lay across his knees as he sat by the reinforced door, a silent sentinel. Eliza lay on the cot, her fear of the outside world warring with a strange, growing sense of security fostered by this broken, vigilant man. He was her unlikely guardian, and she, in turn, was becoming an anchor to a humanity he tried to cast adrift. The snow lay deep, a pristine, deceptive blanket over the wilderness. Supplies were dwindling. Eliza's cough was getting worse. Marcus knew he had to go to Miller's Creek. The thought was an unwelcome weight. The town, with its noise and its memories, was an assault on his senses. But Eliza needed medicine, proper food. "I'm going to town," he announced, his voice gruff as he pulled on his heavy coat. "Stay inside. Door barred. Don't open it for anyone." His gaze, usually so guarded, held a sharp edge of concern. Eliza nodded, anxiety coiling in her stomach. "Be careful, Marcus," she said, the sincerity in her voice surprising them both. He grunted, but his eyes lingered on her for a second longer than usual before he stepped out into the biting cold. The journey was brutal. Miller's Creek, we finally reached it, felt loud, garish, alien. Jed's general store was a familiar island of rough comfort. Jed raised a speculative eyebrow at Marcus's request for cough syrup and extra blankets. "Getting soft, Thorne," he rumbled, a ghostly smile on his lips. Marcus just scowled. As Jed tallied the items, Marcus's gaze drifted to community notice board. And then he saw it. His blood turned to ice. A missing person flyer. The photo was small, a little blurred, but the face was unmistakable. Eleanora Ainsworth, heiress to the Ainsworth global fortune, vanished from her family's estate weeks ago. A reward was offered, a staggering sum, enough to change a dozen lives like his. He stood frozen, the world tilting. Eleanora Ainsworth, the quiet, frightened woman in his cabin. A billionaire. The money, it was a king's ransom. A new leg, a real home, an end to the grinding struggle. He paid Jed, his hand trembling as he took the change, the image of the flyer burning itself into his brain. The journey back was a battle raging in his soul. Turn her in, take the money. She was an heiress. She had a world of privilege to return to. What was he to her? A hermit, a broken soldier. But then Eliza's face swam before him. Her vulnerability, the nascent trust in her eyes, her small, careful act of sewing his button. She wasn't Eleanora Ainsworth, billionaire, to him. She was Eliza, the woman he'd pulled from the brink, whose slow healing he'd witnessed, who had, impossibly, brought a sliver of warmth to his frozen existence. He reached the cabin, the scent of wood smoke a familiar comfort. He heard her moving inside. He took a deep, steadying breath. He couldn't do it. He couldn't sell her out. Not for any price. Some things, honor, loyalty, compassion, were beyond currency. Things he'd thought he'd forfeited long ago. He pushed open the door. Eliza looked up, relief flooding her face. "Marcus, you're back." I was getting worried. Then she saw his expression. The relief died, replaced by apprehension. "What is it? What happened?" He placed the supplies on the table, his movements heavy. He looked at her, truly saw her. Not the face on a poster, but the terrified human being who had found refuge in his desolation. "Eliza," he said, his voice quieter, deeper than she'd ever heard it. "We need to talk. I know there are people looking for you." He didn't mention the name, the wealth, just the truth. "And I think you might be running from something much bigger than you've let on." The color drained from her face. Her hand flew to her mouth, her eyes wide with a terror that was raw and absolute. She looked like she might shatter. Then, something in his steady, non-judgmental gaze seemed to anchor her. She sank onto the cot, shoulders slumping, the fight visibly leaving her. Tears, held back for so long, began to stream down her cheeks. You know? She whispered, her voice breaking. Marcus nodded slowly. Saw a notice in town. He paused, his eyes holding hers. It doesn't change anything for me, who you are or what you have. What matters is if you're safe. Are you Eliza? Her composure crumbled completely. Sobs racked her body, a storm of fear, grief, and exhaustion finally unleashed. Marcus stood still, a silent, unwavering presence, letting her grieve, letting her break. When the storm passed, leaving her gasping and tear-streaked, she looked up at him. No, she choked out. I'm not safe. Or, I wasn't. She took a shuddering breath. My family, the business, it's a gilded cage, Marcus. People want to control me, control everything. They don't care about me. Her voice was laced with profound bitterness. I tried to change things, to fight them, but it was too much. I had to run. I thought if I could just disappear, I could finally be free. But they have eyes everywhere. I walked for days, got lost. I didn't think I'd survive. Her gaze, raw and desperate, fixed on him. When I woke up here, I was so scared. But you didn't ask anything. You just helped. A watery, tremulous smile touched your lips. You treated me like a human being, not an asset. You gave me shelter, kindness. You didn't even know my name. You were my only hope, Marcus. You showed me there was still good in the world. Marcus listened, his heart aching with an empathy he hadn't felt in years. He understood gilded cages, even if it had been made of different bars. He knew what it was to want to vanish. The reward, the fortune it represented, felt like ashes in his mouth. This connection, this fragile trust, this was real. He knelt by the cot, wincing as his bad leg protested. Eleonora, he said, her real name soft on his tongue. Or Eliza, whichever you prefer. You don't have to run anymore. Not by yourself. He met her tear-filled eyes. I'm not turning you in. I'm not taking any money. But you can't stay hidden here forever. It's not truly safe for you, not in the long term. We need to find a way to get you to a place where you are safe, a place of your own choosing. A wave of stunned disbelief, followed by an overwhelming surge of relief, washed over Eliza's face. You mean that? She whispered. Even knowing who I am? A rare, faint smile touched Marcus's lips. Knowing who you are doesn't change the fact that you needed help. And I helped. That's it. He paused. Besides, Sergeant Thorne never leaves anyone behind. Eliza laughed then, a shaky, tear-soaked sound, but undeniably a laugh. It was, Marcus thought, the most beautiful sound he had ever heard. In that moment, in that broken-down cabin, the chasm between a reclusive veteran and a runaway billionaire was bridged by simple human decency. He hadn't just saved Eleonora Ainsworth. He had, perhaps, taken a crucial step towards saving himself. The true reward wasn't money. It was a sudden, surprising lightness in his own chest. With a shared sense of purpose, they began to plan. Eliza had one lifeline. Sarah, an old university friend, now a brilliant and discreet lawyer. The challenge was contacting her, without alerting Eliza's pursuers. Marcus's dormant military instincts for covert communication resurfaced. Skills learned for darker times now repurposed for a mission of rescue. Another clandestine trip, this time to a more distant town. Secured a burner phone. Eliza, disguised in Marcus's oversized clothes, waited, her heart a frantic drum, while he made the purchase. They were a team, forged in shared adversity. The call to Sarah was short, tense, and ultimately successful. Eliza's relief was palpable when she heard her friend's calm, capable voice. Sarah immediately grasped the situation and began to orchestrate a secure extraction, promising to build a legal fortress around Eliza, enabling her to reclaim her life and her company on her own terms. The days before Eliza's departure were a poignant blend of anticipation and an undercurrent of sadness. A comfortable rhythm had established itself. Shared tasks, quiet talks, and silences filled not with tension, but with companionship. Eliza's smiles became more frequent, her laughter less fragile, and Marcus found himself observing these changes with a strange sense of protective pride. He taught her to identify bird songs. She told him of distant lands and books she loved, opening small windows in his shuttered world. One evening, by the fire's glow, Eliza turned to him. "Marcus, how can I ever repay you?" He shrugged, deflecting the intensity of her gratitude. "You don't owe me a thing. Eliza, I did what anyone should have." "No," she insisted, her voice soft but firm. "Not everyone would. Most would have seen the reward. You saw me. You gave me back my hope. That's beyond price." The day of her departure arrived, crisp and diamond bright. An unmarked car would meet them on an old, disused logging road. As they prepared, Marcus packed a small haversack for her, dried meat, his own canteen, his warmest woolen socks. An unspoken sorrow hung in the air. At the cabin door, Eliza paused, looking back. "I'll never forget this place," she whispered. "Or you." Marcus just nodded, his throat unexpectedly tight. The walk to the rendezvous point was mostly silent. When the sleek, dark car materialized, Sarah herself emerged. She was sharp, poised, with kind, intelligent eyes. She embraced Eliza warmly, then extended a hand to Marcus. "Mr. Thorne, Eleanora has told me everything. We are deeply in your debt." "Just glad she's safe," Marcus managed, shaking her hand. Eliza turned to him, tears shining in her blue eyes. "This isn't goodbye, Marcus. Not really. I'll find you. I promise." Then, with a sudden surge of emotion, she hugged him fiercely. He stood rigidly for a moment, startled, then awkwardly patted her back. It was a foreign, yet not entirely unwelcome, sensation. And then she was gone, a final wave before the car disappeared down the snowy track. Marcus stood alone, the silence of the forest pressing in, now tinged with an unfamiliar emptiness. He turned back towards his cabin, towards his old life. But it wasn't the same. He wasn't the same. He had chosen compassion. He had chosen connection. And in doing so, he had found a fragment of his own lost humanity. Weeks bled into months. The wilderness reclaimed its familiar patterns. Marcus half expected Eliza to fade into a memory, absorbed back into her distant, rarefied world. Then one sun-drenched spring morning, a bewildered mail carrier, clutching a sleek, official-looking envelope, found his way to Hemlock Ridge. Inside was a handwritten letter from Eliza. She was safe, she wrote, fighting her battles with Sarah by her side and slowly, surely, reshaping her company into something ethical, something good. But it was the enclosures that made Marcus sit down heavily on his stool. Official documents. Eliza, through a meticulously established trust, had purchased a vast tract of wilderness surrounding his cabin. Hundreds of acres, now deeded to him. He could live there undisturbed forever, and more. She had established the Sergeant Thorne Foundation for Veteran Support. Its mission, to provide wilderness therapy, resources, and community for veterans struggling with the aftershocks of war. She wanted him, if he was willing, to be at heart, to share his strength, to help manage a retreat center to be built on a quiet corner of the land, far enough to preserve his solitude, close enough to offer his wisdom. Tears, hot and unfamiliar, pricked Marcus's eyes. This wasn't charity. It was purpose. It was a path forward, a way to transmute his pain into healing, not just for himself, but for others. The gruff hermit slowly began to emerge from his shell. He helped design the retreat, ensuring its authenticity. He started talking to other veterans, not as an authority, but as a fellow survivor, sharing his own difficult journey towards peace. He found he could listen, truly listen, to the silent screams behind her eyes. Eliza visited as a friend. They'd walked the forest trails, The immense difference in their worlds no longer a barrier, but a testament to the unlikely bond they forged. He still lived in his simple cabin, but it was no longer a fortress against the world. It was a sanctuary from which he could reach out. He had thought he was saving a nobody that cold November day. He'd found a billionaire, yes, but in saving her, he'd also found that she was his only hope. The unexpected catalyst that had led him back not just to the world, but to himself. The ghosts of his past still walked with him, but now they walked more quietly, their sorrow softened by the enduring warmth of a single, profound act of kindness and the quiet, powerful rhythm of a heart slowly, steadily learning to heal.